ultimately, we had several months to really build up a relationship and a friendship. And it was really just the week before John's execution that he finally agreed to film. Where I think at that point he knew that we weren't the type of filmmakers that were going to misrepresent him or his views or his story, and we're going to treat, him and his very complex feelings, with respect. So, the sort of conversation started many months prior, but the actual filming just started, at the very end of our production schedule.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Let's Talk Film podcast from the Woodstock Film Festival. I'm Amanda Nassim. I'm a producer and the head shorts programmer here at the Woodstock Film Fest. And I am joined by two filmmakers, directors Smriti Mundhra and Maya Gnyp, the director and producer of I Am Ready, Warden, which is a short film currently nominated for an Oscar in the short documentary category. It also was the honorable mention in the best short documentary category at the 2024 Woodstock Film Festival. We had a wonderful conversation with Smriti and Barbara Koppel during our festival back in October. So I'm so happy to have you both here to talk more about this film. I just want to ask you two to kind of jump in and introduce yourselves for the audience first.
You go first, Smriti.
Okay. I'm Smriti Mundhra. I'm the director of I'm Ready, Warden, and my filmography is sort of split between short documentaries. Warden was my third short documentary, and streaming series for Netflix and Hulu and other platforms. That often center around dating in different communities. I created a show called Indian Matchmaking on Netflix, and then its subsequent spin-offs, Jewish Matchmaking, and now Muslim Matchmaker, which is on Hulu. So a little bit of dating, a little bit of death row.
Quite a combination. No, currently watching Muslim Matchmaker. Very cool. Maya, tell us more about you.
Thanks so much, and we're so happy to be here. We had such a great time at Woodstock last year, so thank you so much. My name's Maya Gnyp. I'm the producer of I Am Ready, Warden. I'm Australian, as you can probably hear from my accent. I've made about 5 feature documentaries in Australia before moving over to LA, and where I started working with Smriti. And we've since been making this is actually our second short film together. Short doc together, and we've also made some TV as well. Muslim Matchmaker, which you can watch on Hulu.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Shelter is the name of the previous short that you made together, right? Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
I haven't gotten to see that one, but I'm excited about it. Well, cool. Let me just jump in here. So this film is a heavy film. You're following, John Henry Ramirez, who is a death row prisoner facing execution, and you're with him through his execution. And that's something that I was so struck by the first time that I saw this film, because that level of access to someone up until the moment is really striking. So I just wanted to kind of get an intro from you. How did you find this story? What interested you about it? Was there something around telling a story of someone experiencing, an impending execution? Well, how did you come in to tell this story?
Yeah, so we knew we wanted to make a short film about the topic of capital punishment. We knew that we really wanted to make that with MTV Documentary FIlms and with Sheila Nevins as well, who's been a brilliant partner for us. I just want to also say up front, she's been amazing and a really great support, and we're so honored to be working with her. And then Smriti, who reads everything, came across the writing of Kerry Blackinger, who writes really poignantly and beautifully briefly about people in the prison system. At that stage, she was based in Texas as well, so she was focused on the Texas correctional facilities, and she had a relationship with John Henry already. So she wrote a really brilliant article called Dungeons and Dragons about inmates playing Dungeons and Dragons, which was, I think it was shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize.
Amazing. Okay.
It was, Smriti reached out to Kerry and said, we would love to to collaborate with you on a film. And it was a real gift, really, for us to be able to to work with her on this film, because we had very little time and very little access to John before his next execution date was coming up. So it would have been it's really hard. Just the communication is really hard. By the time we would be able to get a letter or a message to John, and then for him to write back to us, and then to start a relationship from scratch would have taken a really long time, and just time that we just didn't have. So having Kerry's involvement and collaboration in that was a real gift. So she was able. We can only send 3 people into the death row space in order to record our interview. So it was always our DP, it was Kerry, and it was Smriti. And so John, from the very beginning, felt very comfortable during the interviews, of which we only had 3. So we only really have 3 hours of interview with John before the execution went through. So it was, we were able to capture really poignant moments because of that, and because of Kerry's involvement too.
Oh, wow. So you were able to interview John for just 3 hours total before his execution. And how far before the execution did you meet him and start getting to know him? Was it multiple visits as well? Okay.
Yeah. So it was about 6 months before, and it was approximately every 3 months.
And there's another character in the film who, I was really struck by him. His name's Aaron Castro. He's the son of John's victim. His dad was murdered when he was a 14-year-old. And obviously this has been a huge mark on his life. And I felt that his emotionality throughout the film was key to the storytelling. And I just wanted to ask you guys to tell us more about him and working with him, and how did he get comfortable with you and trust you, and just let us know how you built that relationship.
Yeah. So I had reached out to the Castro family when we first started making this film, just to invite their input and ideally their participation as well. Aaron responded, but he was very clear from the beginning that he didn't want to be in the film. He just, said, because I think he would get frustrated every time there was so much media attention on John, and little consideration to the victim side, the victims have to go through. So he essentially at the outset said, I'm not going to be in your film, but if you're going to make this film, you need to know that the impact of what John did. We got into a cadence of talking on the phone, sometimes for hours at a time, several times a week, where Aaron could really open up, about his feelings and everything he had gone through. And though ostensibly he would always say that, execution is justice and closure, there was somewhere within him, I could sense also a sort of competing feeling of really not wanting another person to die in his name. And so we talked about that a lot, and ultimately, we had several months to really build up a relationship and a friendship. And it was really just the week before John's execution that he finally agreed to film. Where I think at that point he knew that we weren't the type of filmmakers that were going to misrepresent him or his views or his story, and we're going to treat, him and his very complex feelings, with respect. So, the sort of conversation started many months prior, but the actual filming just started, at the very end of our production schedule.
Wow, got you. Okay. there's a scene with Aaron in the car, and you're kind of filming him from behind. I think this is in Act 3. And he actually receives a message from John that he wanted to leave him, it seemed like just minutes before John was executed. Was this a message that Aaron was expecting? And how did you, if not, how did you as filmmakers prepare to capture something so extraordinary?
There's sort of an interesting backstory to that moment. Of course, like in the course of our conversations, I had asked Aaron, several times, like, have you ever thought about talking to John? Did you ever want to talk with him or, hear from him? John, we knew from our conversations with him that sort of his biggest unresolved business, his biggest sort of deep wish was to be able to communicate to the Castro family that he was apologetic for what he did and he was remorseful, like deeply remorseful for what he did. But because of the way the rules work in the prison system, he had no mechanism by which to reach out to them. It was incumbent on the Castro family to initiate that kind of contact. And I had asked Aaron about that, and he's like, no, I have nothing to say to him. I don't want to hear anything he has to say. That was sort of what he had maintained. The very last day before John's execution, or the day of his execution, Aaron finally said, like, I want to talk to him. I want to hear what he has to say. I think that was still coming from a place of anger, I don't think he had kind of come around, to a different frame of mind at that point. But by the time I think at that morning, like he kind of realized like this execution might actually happen. And if he was ever going to have that opportunity to say what he wanted to say to John or to, that this would be it. But again, at that point, it was too late because, once a prisoner is transported to the death chamber and, like they cannot communicate anymore, like with the victims. But I did ask Aaron because I knew we were able to communicate with John because we were on his list of, last phone calls. I asked Aaron, is it okay if I let him know that you were open to that contact? Because it's literally what John had been seeking for 14 years, the entire time he was on death row. And Aaron said that was fine. So we were able to tell John that, look, he was finally open, to talking with you, maybe just yelling at you, maybe just, hurling expletives in your face. We don't know, but like he was open to that conversation. And that's when John asked us to record that message as his last words, literally before we kind of lost, before he was physically taken to the death chamber, and said, do with this what you will, but if you want to share it with him, this is what I would say. So once we had this bit of recording audio, as filmmakers, it was a bit of a complicated question in terms of what do we do with it. But because Aaron had kind of opened that door before, I felt it was fair to ask him, to tell him that we had this message and ask him what he wanted us to do with it. And I said, we can just delete it. If you never want to think about it again, we can give it to you and you can listen to it privately.
Right.
Or you can listen to it while we're filming. And he said that it was fine for us to film while he listened to it for the first time. So that's how that moment came to be. I think even if Aaron was intellectually prepared for what he was going to hear John say, I think even just hearing that man say his name and say that I'm sorry, hearing those words like addressed to him, I think had a really strong and swift impact on him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is just such a deeply emotional moment, and it's crazy to hear that actually you all, the filmmaking team, were kind of pivotal to that communication between them, which is so sensitive.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, there's another character I'm really interested in who's in the film. This is Israel, Izzy.
Mm-hmm.
This is John's son. So he's 16 when we meet him. I think he was 4 when his dad became incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
I am so struck by that there's a final phone call that his dad places to him before he's about to be executed, and I'm so struck by how sort of like matter of fact it is.
Uh-huh.
And I think there's a way that John describes his son in the film. Yeah, can you just tell us more about Izzy and sort of how, like, what you perceived of him interpreting, this experience for himself, but also watching his dad go through it, I mean, for most of his life, right?
Yeah. So Izzy, he traveled. Well, I guess he's been going to see John, for a very, very long time. He lives, and it's a long sort of drive for him as well. But he goes, usually with Jan as well, because Jan goes every month, and sort of Izzy, I don't think used to go every month, but he used to go a lot for sure. And we met him around that time, around the time of the execution, maybe sort of about a week or so before, and we were able to spend a lot of time with him, during that week, and we were very, very lucky in that he felt very comfortable with us, very quickly, and I think he connected sort of with all of our crew. He had a really special relationship with one of our DPs as well. They would talk sort of like comics, and he's a real teenage kid too, so he was really, we have all these behind the scenes photos of him like learning to use the camera and trying to, so he was able to really integrate as part of the crew, and I think that's such a documentary sort of approach too. We build our crews very intentionally too, so they're all very sensitive, creative, sort of like masterful filmmakers in their own right. And I think we were such a unit during that time that because we didn't really know what was going to be happening next, so we had to have all communication channels open with all of the sort of subjects who were all trying to sort of either stop the execution or sort of trying to find time to see John for the last time. So there was a lot going on at that time. So we were all really moving as a close-knit unit, and Izzy was really part of that too. So he was really, because we were so close with Jan at that time. A lot of people sort of flew in for the execution from, not just from the US, but also internationally as well. So we had sort of a rare opportunity to meet some other people. So it was a really, I just say that because it was just a really busy time. But I think because we all grew so close, he felt so comfortable with us being there. And this is a real learning. This is the first film that I'd ever made with an inmate as well, and sort of the real learning for me was about how fractured the communication can be and how important it is to have access to so many different people, so that John can spread a message sort of through his people to us about what's going to happen next. And we knew that at some point, we knew that John didn't want Izzy in the death chamber, to witness the execution. We knew that at some point John was going to call Izzy, and sort of we had a few different moments that we wanted to film, but at that moment, it became really clear sort of to us as the crew that Izzy really wanted us with him. And we were with him sort of throughout those last moments. And we were able to capture that phone call. And it was a really special, I think I'm always going to remember this moment when John called and Izzy picked up, and he sort of, one of the first things he said is like, I'm here with the documentary crew, because he wanted to, we had to sort of stand back. It's verite. We were right there. But, one of the first things he says, I'm here with the documentary crew. And John was like, oh, that's great. Fantastic. And then you could just see him be so happy to be participating sort of in this process that John really valued as well. So they were sort of like all in it together. And so I feel like he felt completely comfortable in that moment, and we were able to be with him afterwards as well, which was really meaningful, I think, for everyone. Yeah.
So meaningful. And you can really see how you all as storytellers carry such a great responsibility in that kind of situation, because you have the relationships with all of these people as well now. There's one other character that I was really interested in. Mark Gonzalez, who's the district attorney who asked for the execution order to be rescinded for moral reasons against John. And I was really curious how you decided that he needed to be a character in this film, and also how out of the ordinary it is that maybe a Texas district attorney would do something like that. And if there's been kind of any other like national conversation that you're aware of about that, like was that empowering for anyone else? Or obviously he's got connections to the community too, because we see in the film that he's leaving a live stream on Facebook for community members to learn about the status of the case. So please tell us more about him.
Yeah, Mark is a fascinating person, and honestly, there's so much about his background. Like he was sort of worthy of his own documentary.
Yeah, I got that hunch.
Yeah, we filmed with him because he took this extraordinary step, to try to rescind his own death warrant that his office had filed, and that was the first time. As you see in the film, it was the first time in Texas history that a district attorney, so somebody who's ostensibly on the side of law and order, had tried to call off an execution for moral reasons. This is way going against you can imagine that's way going against the grain in Texas. And he took a big political risk to do that. I mean, it really was a question whether maybe he was going to be able to call off that date of execution, and so we kind of tried to follow as much as we could the sort of legal back and forth that he was trying to do and his office was trying to do in order to get John's execution stayed. And it was a really earnest effort. There were many hearings and there was, all kinds of things about that. Ultimately, as you can see in the film, he wasn't successful. But I think the thing that it really illuminated to me was that there actually is a lot of power in DA's offices. I think it just so happened in that case that Mark, because he was new to office, was unaware that if his office didn't file for a date of execution, that there wouldn't be one, and it was only when his office just by rote, his office had just filed for that date, and then he couldn't sort of reverse that, though he tried, and there was definitely a political consequence, after that. I think he faced a lot of backlash for his efforts and, was ultimately recalled from office. He is sort of representative of this cohort of progressive prosecutors that are all very networked, in the United States, across different states. And, we have been trying in sort of alongside our, screenings and our awards campaign and everything, is to really bring the film into DA's offices and law schools around the country. So that way, one, there can be sort of a more dimensional conversation around capital punishment and whether or not it's the right approach, to justice, but also to remind district attorneys, and even law students who will eventually go on to become those DAs or become those judges, that they actually, you don't need a big national ban, on capital punishment. That's like becomes a big kind of cultural issue, political issue, right?
Yeah, culture wars. Yeah.
Culture wars. Yeah. But until that happens, and, God willing, one day it will, but like, until that happens, there is a lot of power in those local seats. A district attorney just simply doesn't have to call for a date of execution. And then that execution doesn't get scheduled. So I think it's also just about reminding people of the power of local government and what local politicians, whether it judges, DAs, et cetera, the impact that they can have. But also just, like illuminating someone who really took a brave step, for his moral conviction.
Totally. I'd love to know more about his story, because I thought, how did he get elected as district attorney?
He got elected the same year as Trump.
There we go.
If you ever want a sort of peek into the complexity of Texas, I know especially I live on the coast, like we tend to write off certain parts of the country, but Texas is a complex place. And the same county that votes for Donald Trump also votes for Mark Gonzalez, tattoos and all, into district attorney. So people are complex.
Mark, the next film. Okay. Well, I'm so curious about him. I'm going to do a few little bit of research more about Mark Gonzalez here, but progressive district attorney in Texas. But I guess this kind of leads me to like an overall question here. So the kind of defining character in this film for me is Aaron, and he's so emotional. He's experienced such great loss for so long, and I think, like we were talking about before we started recording today, was how Aaron felt that the execution of John Henry Ramirez was tied to justice, that he would maybe feel um, emotional relief or like some kind of emotional freedom by seeing John executed. And by the end of the film, there's an emotional scene with Aaron, and then we actually see John in a casket. We see his body in a casket. And when I saw that image of him in a casket, I thought, he's free. I felt like he was experiencing freedom. And it felt like that's something that Aaron was trying to feel freedom. Aaron was trying to feel freedom from the emotional pain of all of this, right? So I just wondered if you could just talk a little bit about how, that Aaron has seen growth. He's sort of moved on his feelings about this issue of capital punishment, and if it was the right choice for the state to do to John, and also if that brought him any kind of healing or freedom, or so I just wanted to hear either of you or both of you speak about that topic, because I know that we want to think that people can change. We want to think that people can redeem themselves. So what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, it's a very complex question with respect to Aaron, because Aaron is the person who is the most personally at stake here, and it's really difficult to ask someone whose father was murdered by a man, can you forgive that man? And that's a journey. And I think what you see in the film is the very beginning of that journey. You see Aaron recognizing that John's execution didn't bring him the closure that he was seeking, or the freedom, that he was seeking to live his life, to dwell in like fonder memories of his father. And I think little by little, Aaron, he is a extremely empathetic person at heart, and I think for him, that evolution was less about John and more about his own values, and him kind of coming to terms with his own values, that he didn't want to see another life lost or another child without a father his name. And even to this day, he has trouble saying the words about forgiveness, because it's like, I don't know, like if you ask me, if I had to experience something like that, if my loved one, my parent, my child, was taken from me in such a horrific manner, and you asked me whether it was a year later, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years on my deathbed, if I forgave that person, I can still to this day, having made this film, I don't think I could tell you what the answer would be. That is a really tall order to ask of Aaron, but I think what he was able to show was that the justice and closure that he was promised, that he had spent his whole life chasing, wasn't delivered in that moment, and actually the way for him to be able to let all of this go, the trauma, the pain of losing his father, and reorient himself around his future and around being able to sort of reclaim the positive memories, of his father, was to let go that thirst for vengeance, so I think that the arc towards forgiveness is a much longer journey, and I think on some days, he feels it, and on other days he doesn't. I don't want to speak for him, but that's sort of my conversations, that I've had with him. But I think he would say that execution didn't bring him the closure that he thought he was going to get. That's powerful testimony when we think about the bigger issue about whether capital punishment is something that's worth inflicting or not. Because we do it in the name of victims, right? We do it in the name of people like us. Yeah, I think that was his testimony that it didn't really bring him the closure that he thought he was going to get.
It's such a powerful way to end the film, to see his emotional journey kind of land there. So I guess, before we kind of wrap up here, I wanted to ask y'all something a little bit lighter, which is the fact that this film is on the award circuit right now. Oscar nominated in the short documentary category. So tons of filmmakers, like, obviously this is their dream. This is a huge moment for y'all. So, and Smriti, I know you've been there before. So I just want to ask you, what's it been like sort of being on the award circuit, trying to do some press, trying to get the word out about your film, talking to new people? Like, tell us a little bit about this particular moment in time for y'all right now.
I'll let Maya share because this is her first time going through it. So she's coming into it with fresh eyes.
It's been really surreal, I will say. And I had, I didn't really know what to expect. And I think we've been really lucky in that we've had an amazing team as well. Like, we've had brilliant supporters along the way to sort of to help us and to guide us too. But I think it's been, especially for, overall, like, we've met so many people, and we've been to sort of a lot of the events, and it's so what I've loved about it is actually the sense of community around the doc sort of the doc filmmakers as well, and that's been really great. And all those, there are so many of these precious moments. These events are so, they're so fun. Some are really big, but there's always, at each of them, there's always one really precious moment where where it's filmmaker to filmmaker, and you're just, sharing ideas and talking to each other about the film that you made, and about, the future films that you'll make as well. So I think the community aspect has been sort of the part that I've really cherished, and the part that I've really enjoyed the most out of this entire journey. And especially now, voting's finished. Now we can just sort of enjoy the events, and we can all sort of relax a little bit too. But overall, I think speaking about the film as much as we have been able to, and we're so grateful for the platform that has allowed us to do that. And I think, the film has really stayed with people, even after the first or second viewing, and that's something that that I'm really proud of.
Fantastic. I'm so admiring of you and your team. So congratulations on getting to this moment. So can you just tell the audience where they can watch I Am Ready, Warden?
Yep, it's on Paramount Plus.
Okay. Streaming on Paramount. And then what about you two? Where, if people would like to follow you online, where can they see you?
I think Instagram's probably the best bet. Yeah.
My Instagram handle is very easy. It's just my first name and last name. Maya has a bunch of like periods and stuff in her Instagram handle, so she's gonna have to spell it out.
I just get worried about security, so I change it up a bit.
Amazing. Okay. Well, I'm so appreciative of y'all being here. Thanks so much for this conversation. Loved hearing more about the film, and we're absolutely rooting for you. So we'll be watching.
Thank you, Amanda. And I have to say that one of the most cherished moments of this entire journey was the jury statement for our honorable mention at Woodstock Film Festival. Was honestly something I will, print out and frame on my wall. It was so meaningful. To those words were incredibly meaningful to us, as filmmakers, and so specific and thoughtful. So we got something so cherished from our experience at Woodstock. And really are thankful to the jury and the way that they sort of spoke about our film.
Oh, that's amazing. Actually, I think I have the statement here. So the jury from the film festival, they had to say they wanted to extend an honorable mention to I Am Ready, Warden. And they said it's a film with scenes of such sincere and ferocious humanity that they will likely stay with us forever. To capture moments like these requires not just a mastery of craft, but a filmmaker with the soulfulness and deep well of compassion for their subjects. So congratulations on creating an exceptional piece of work. Very true words.
Still get chills hearing that.
I hate you. just want to say again, thank you both so much for being here, and good luck at the Oscars.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Amanda.
Okay.
Thank you so much.